Before we begin, before the trees close in and the light thins out, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been truly alone? Not the kind of alone where your phone still works or a road is only a mile away, but the kind where darkness stretches for days in every direction? Have you ever felt watched by something that understands fear better than you do? Out there, rules don't just keep you safe, they keep you sane. And when they fail, people disappear quietly. If stories like this unsettle you, if they make you feel that tightness in your chest that says the wilderness is bigger and older than us, then take a second to support this channel. Leave a like, subscribe, or tell us in the comments where you listen from. Isolation is easier when you know someone else is listening. And now, listen carefully. My name is Caleb Running Bear, and I was an enforcement ranger for the Blackfeet Nation Tribal Lands, sworn under federal cross-deputation. I served 17 years patrolling the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains, from 2 Medicine Lake north to Cut Bank Creek, including stretches of land most maps leave blank on purpose. When people picture my job, they imagine lost hikers, poachers, maybe the occasional drunk tourist who wandered too far off Trail 3. That's the version they're allowed to imagine. What I worked in was a jurisdiction where the rules exist not to prevent accidents, but to contain something that preys on human behavior. Compassion, duty, recognition. The Blackfeet Reservation covers over 1.5 million acres of prairie, forest, and alpine terrain. You can drive for hours without seeing a fence line. Radio repeaters fail in the valleys. GPS drifts near the limestone ridges. Winter comes early and leaves late. Out there, when something goes wrong, it stays wrong. There is no backup coming fast. By my 3rd year, I learned there were 2 sets of rules. The ones in the handbook, and the ones passed verbally, usually at night, usually after someone didn't come home. The first time I heard about the woman in white, I didn't believe it. That was in 2009, during a joint patrol briefing with Fish and Wildlife. One of the older rangers, Thomas Heavy Runner, 32 years on, mentioned her like he was talking about a weather system. Not superstition. Not myth. Just a condition. Don't respond to a lone female voice after dusk, he said. Especially if she knows your name. Someone laughed. He didn't. Thomas didn't make it to retirement. None of them do. Within my first 10 paragraphs, you deserve to know this. The rules already failed once, and I was part of that failure. In 2011, Ranger Eliana Fox, age 26, disappeared near Divide Creek, just south of the Canadian border. Officially, it was exposure. Unofficially, she broke Rule 3. She followed a crying woman off route after sunset. The call came in fragmented, wind noise, breath, Eliana saying, stay where you are. Then nothing. We found her boots 3 days later, placed neatly beside the creek. No tracks leading away. No blood. No body. The report avoided certain explanations. It always does. I survived because I learned to stop asking why and start asking how long. The land teaches you scale. Trees older than your family name. Glacial scars that remember weight we can't imagine. And something else, something that learned us back. The woman in white didn't appear everywhere. She followed patterns. Patrol routes. Response times. She learned which of us would bend. The first rule I was taught, never written down, was simple. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge voices you cannot visually confirm. It sounds obvious. It isn't. Voices carry strangely in the mountains. Wind throws them. Water bends them. And sometimes, they say things only a real person would know. My 2nd year as lead ranger, I worked with Deputy Mark Alvarez, Countyside Liaison. We were running a night perimeter after a lightning storm sparked 3 small fires. Around 23:40, we heard a woman call out from the timberline. She said Mark's name. Full name. Correct pronunciation. Mark took 1 step forward. I grabbed his vest and said, "No visual. Don't answer." The voice adjusted. Came closer. Softer. "Please, It said. I can't feel my legs. That's how it works. It doesn't rush. It calibrates. Rule 2. Do not approach white clothing in low-light conditions. You'd think that would be easy too. Until you're scanning with a flashlight and catch a flash of pale fabric between trees. Until your brain fills in the rest. Rule 3. Never leave an established patrol route after dusk. That was the one Eliana broke. Rule 4. If the voice uses family terms, mother, son, auntie, you disengage immediately. This rule was added later. After 2014. After my cousin. The woman in white didn't start with me. She started long before radios. Elders told stories about a figure called Artsietsepoyi, the walker who borrows faces. Missionaries wrote about a mourning woman seen along the passes. Park Service logs from the 1930s reference unidentified female subject causing ranger hesitation. Different names. Same behavior. She appears as a woman in pale clothing, sometimes a dress, sometimes a parka, always wrong for the weather. She never approaches directly. She waits for you to close the distance. She uses rules against you. Search and rescue protocols. Duty to assist. The fact that we don't leave people behind. My confidence held until October 2014. That was when my cousin Lena Running Bear went missing. Lena wasn't a ranger. She worked seasonal trail maintenance. Grew up on this land same as me. She knew the rules as well as anyone without a badge. On October 17th, she radioed in late, said she saw someone standing near Old Agency Road, white jacket, waving. She broke Rule 1 by answering. She broke Rule 3 by stepping off the route. The last transmission we have is her laughing nervously and saying, "Caleb, she looks like Aunt May." Aunt May died in 1998. We searched for 8 days. Snow came early. We found Lena's radio smashed against a rock. Battery intact. No blood. No tracks. After that, I stopped sleeping through the night. The escalation was subtle at first. Calls came in more frequently. Voices used more names. The woman in white learned our shift schedules. She waited near known compassion points, trailheads, campgrounds, places where rules already bend. Administration told us to log sightings as unconfirmed civilian activity. Pressure came down to keep patrol numbers up. Tourism dollars mattered. You can't close a trail for something you can't officially name. Knowledge passed informally. Tailgate briefings. Coffee poured a little heavier. Someone would say, "She's active near Cut Bank," and everyone would reroute without discussion. The first time I saw her clearly was in 2016, near Red Eagle Mountain. Snow on the ground. Moon high. She stood between two firs. White dress moving like it was underwater. Her face was wrong. Not distorted. Just assembled from familiarity. Pieces of people I knew. She didn't speak that time. She smiled. I logged it as a visual anomaly. That's the term they prefer. By then, patrol routes were already being erased. Not officially. Just neglected. Trails fell off the map. GPS markers removed temporarily. The land reclaimed the paths that led too close. Because the rules don't stop her. They slow her. They buy time. And time is what she feeds on. I'm telling you this because the woman in white doesn't stay contained. She adapts. She follows people who leave. Rangers retire. Families move. And sometimes she follows compassion all the way out of the wilderness. If you hear someone call your name where no one should be, remember this. They sound like someone you love for a reason. After Lena disappeared, the rules changed, not on paper, but in tone. Before, they were cautions. After, they were boundaries etched into how we spoke to each other. We stopped saying if. We started saying when. Administration never called a meeting about her. There was no memorial plaque, no flag lowered. Seasonal worker. adult, voluntary risk. Those were the phrases used. The elders came to me instead. Quietly, one at a time. They asked where I'd last heard her voice. That mattered to them more than where she was last seen. By 2015, I'd been promoted to senior patrol lead, which meant I trained new rangers. I didn't teach them everything at once. You can't. You give them the handbook first. Let them believe the land is only dangerous in predictable ways. Then, after their first winter, you sit them down and explain why we don't answer certain calls. That's how Rule 5 came back. It wasn't new. It was old. Older than the radios. Rule 5, if you hear someone crying but cannot hear breathing between sobs, disengage. People cry with rhythm. Lungs demand it. The woman in white learned to approximate emotion, but she still didn't need air. Not the way we do. The first recruit I lost under my watch was Daniel Pike, age 23. Summer of 2016. He was from Idaho. Big heart. Volunteered for every extra patrol. Wanted to make a difference. We paired him with Ranger Melissa Crow Shield, a veteran with 9 years in. They were running a dusk sweep near Lower St. Mary Lake when they heard a child crying. Daniel froze. Melissa reached for him. The crying said, "Mom." Melissa had 2 kids. One of them had that voice. She broke Rule 4. Daniel followed her. The radio recording is burned into my memory. Melissa shouting for a visual. Daniel saying, "She's right there, I can see her." Then the child stopped crying and said, very calmly, "You came fast this time." We found Melissa alive. Barefoot. Hypothermic. No memory of the last 2 hours. Daniel was never found. After that, I stopped pretending this was about patrol coverage. This was about selection. The woman in white wasn't random. She tested us. She learned who would step forward first, who would hesitate, who would stay behind. And she learned how to split us. We added Rule 6 after Daniel. Rule 6, never pursue alone, even if the other person insists you leave them. This one went against everything we were trained to do. You don't abandon a partner. But that's what she uses. She creates scenarios where staying feels right and leaving feels like murder. In 2017, we started noticing something else. She was using technology. At first, it was radios. Mimicking call signs. Repeating phrases back with slight delays, like she was learning cadence. Then came phones. Lost hikers would report missed calls from numbers they recognized. Dead relatives, old friends. Voicemails with only wind and footsteps. One hiker, Casey Moore, survived an encounter near Badger 2 Medicine. He told us his phone rang at 2 a.m. The caller ID said Dad. His father had died 10 years earlier. The voicemail he played us later didn't have words. Just fabric moving. Like a dress brushing against brush. We updated Rule 7. Rule 7. Do not answer calls or messages from known contacts while in restricted zones after dark. We didn't tell the public why. We said it was a signal issue. We always say that. My family started asking questions. My wife Elena noticed the way I flinched when the phone rang at night. My son Noah, 8 years old then, asked why I never told stories about work anymore. How do you explain that something in the woods knows your child's nickname? The first time it used Noah's voice, I was alone. It was late fall 2018. I was checking a remote sensor near Rising Wolf Mountain. Snow was coming in sideways. Visibility was trash. My radio crackled, not with static, but with a clear, soft voice. Dad? I can't find the trail. Noah calls me Dad. Not Papa. Not Father. Dad. I stopped breathing. That's not metaphor. My lungs locked up. Rule 4 screamed in my head. Family terms. Disengage. But my hands were shaking. My brain was already building images. Noah cold, scared, lost because of me. I keyed the radio halfway before I caught myself. Instead of answering, I said nothing. I turned off my headlamp. I sat down in the snow and waited. The voice adjusted. "It's really dark," it said. "Mom's hurt." That was new. She hadn't used compound scenarios before. Not like that. I stayed silent for 27 minutes. I know because I timed my breaths. When the voice finally stopped, the forest felt hollow. Like something had left reluctantly. I drove home without turning the radio back on. That night, I held Noah until he squirmed away and complained I was crushing him. Elena watched me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. I didn't tell her why. By 2019, the woman in white wasn't confined to the high country anymore. Sightings came in from prairie edges, river bottoms, places with cell service. We lost 2 volunteer firefighters responding to a roadside distress call near Hart Butte. Both followed a woman in a white shawl into a gully. Only one came back. He wouldn't speak. Not ever. Containment was failing. Administration's response was to redraw boundaries, shrink restricted zones. Less area, fewer incidents on paper. Patrol routes were quietly erased. Trails closed for maintenance never reopened. Locals noticed. Tourists didn't. Elders started calling it by an older name again. One I won't repeat here. Names matter. She listens. We added Rule 8. Rule 8, if she appears closer after you stop moving, you must retreat immediately, even if retreat breaks another rule. This rule saved lives. It also broke people. Because sometimes retreat meant leaving someone screaming behind you. The worst night of my career came in March 2020. COVID had just started closing things down. Fewer tourists. More locals out on the land. More desperation. More chances for her to exploit duty. My sister Marianne was driving home from Browning when she called me. Her voice was tight. "There's a woman standing in the road," she said. "White coat. She won't move." My stomach dropped. "Don't stop," I said. "Don't get out. Drive around her. She looks hurt, Caleb." Rule conflict. Family. Compassion. "Marianne," I said, "listen to me. Do not." The call cut out. I broke every rule I had left. I drove like a man possessed. No radio check-in. No backup request. I found Marianne's car on the shoulder. Engine running, door open. White fabric led into the trees. I stood there for a long time, gripping my flashlight until my hand went numb. I called Marianne's name once. Just once. From the dark, a voice answered. "Caleb," it said. She followed me. "You always said help people." It sounded exactly like her. I didn't go in. I turned around. I got back in my truck. I drove until I couldn't see the trees anymore. Marianne was never found. That choice lives in me. It always will. I resigned 6 months later. Officially, it was burnout. Unofficially, they were relieved. I knew too much. I wouldn't soften reports anymore. But leaving didn't make me safe. The woman in white doesn't respect jurisdiction. She respects behavior. And now that you know the rules, you need to understand this part. She learns faster when we talk about her. After I resigned, people assumed distance would protect me. That stepping out of uniform was the same as stepping out of range. That assumption gets people killed. The land doesn't care what patch you wear. Neither does she. I stayed on the east edge of the reservation, near Duck Lake, close enough to family, far enough from the mountains that I could pretend the trees weren't watching. I took a job maintaining equipment for public works. Daylight hours. Predictable routes. I told Elena it was temporary. She didn't argue. She just looked tired. I kept the rules anyway. All of them. I didn't walk after dusk. I didn't answer unknown calls. I never followed voices. The rules had become habits, and habits had become scars. That's when the calls started coming to me. Not distress calls, questions. Former rangers, deputies, fire volunteers, people who had heard things they couldn't log. They asked how I survived, what I did differently. I never gave them theory, only procedure, only rules. That's how knowledge spreads now, quietly, person to person. Because officially, there is nothing to contain. In late 2020, I learned the woman in white had crossed the border. A constable from Alberta, name withheld, called me through a mutual contact. He described a woman in pale clothing near Waterton Lakes National Park. She knew officers' names. She used radio call signs that hadn't been active in years. Different country. Same behavior. Containment was never geographic. It was behavioral. Cultural. She went where the rules were similar enough to exploit. By then, she had refined her approach. She stopped appearing fully. Sometimes it was just fabric behind a tree. Sometimes a reflection in glass. Sometimes only a voice, perfectly placed, using Doppler and delay like she understood acoustics better than we ever would. And sometimes, she sent children. In February 2021, a rancher named Paul Little Dog found a barefoot boy standing in his pasture at dawn. White shirt. No jacket. Temperature was 12 degrees Fahrenheit. The boy said his mother was hurt in the trees. Paul called it in. Did everything right. Stayed on his porch. Didn't approach. The boy looked up at him and said, "Uncle Paul, please." Paul had no nephew. The boy smiled. By the time deputies arrived, Paul was gone. No tracks. No sign of struggle. Just a single small handprint on the porch rail. Too pale. Too cold. That was when Rule 9 was added. Rule 9, if the entity presents as a child, disengage immediately. Do not speak. Do not look back. That rule broke people. You could see it in their faces when we told them. Some nodded and understood. Some stared at the ground like they'd already failed. Because the thing about children is that they collapse every moral structure we have. We are built to protect them. She knows that now. I started keeping my own records. Not reports. Patterns. Dates. Names. Phrases she reused. She favored repetition. Certain sentences appeared again and again across years and locations. You always said help people. I can't feel my legs. It's really dark. She also learned when to stop. When to retreat just enough to make us question ourselves. Survivors always wondered if they imagined it. That doubt did more damage than fear ever could. Elena left in June 2021. She didn't say it was because of the woman in white. She said I wasn't present. That I listened to the woods even when we were inside. That I flinched at our son's voice. She wasn't wrong. Noah stayed with her sister in Great Falls. I stayed behind. Someone had to. The first time the woman in white came to my house, it wasn't dramatic. No voice. No apparition. Just a white scarf folded neatly on my porch chair. Elena used to wear one like it. I burned it in the fire pit and didn't sleep for 3 days. By 2022, I realized something worse. She wasn't just learning individuals. She was learning systems. Emergency response times. Volunteer availability. Which agencies coordinated and which didn't. She exploited jurisdictional gaps like seams in fabric. One night, I was asked to consult on a missing persons case near Birch Creek. 2 teenagers gone after a bonfire. Officially, alcohol-related misadventure. Unofficially, one of them had texted his girlfriend from the woods. There's a woman out here who looks lost. She knows my name. The text timestamp was 2:17 a.m. Search and rescue went in at first light. I stayed at the edge and watched. At 7:43, a SAR volunteer broke formation. I recognized him, Jonah Wells, father of 3. He'd heard something in the trees. A woman calling his daughter's name. I shouted. He didn't hear me. He didn't come back. That was devastating event number 3. Not because Jonah died, though he did, but because everyone there knew why. And still, someone would break again. We all would, given enough pressure. The rules don't fail because they're wrong. They fail because we are human. BY 2023. The woman in white began using recordings. Voicemails left on phones that weren't called. Audio files appearing on dash cams. Bodycam footage with whispered overlays that no one remembered recording. One deputy quit after reviewing footage where his own voice begged him to come closer. He swore he never spoke. She had learned how to echo us. That year, Noah turned 12. He started asking about the woods. About my old job. About why Mom wouldn't drive near the mountains anymore. I told him some places remember us longer than we remember them. I did not tell him his voice had already been used. The closest I've come to dying since leaving the service happened on a foggy morning in October 2024. I was driving early, before sunrise. Fog thick enough to erase the road edges. I saw a figure standing in the lane ahead. White. Still. I slowed but didn't stop. Heart pounding. Hands steady. I remembered every rule. As I passed, she turned her head. It was my mother's face. My mother died in 2003. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The recognition was the weapon. In my rearview mirror, the road was empty. That's when I understood the final escalation. She doesn't need us to break rules anymore. She just needs us to hesitate. And hesitation is enough. I'm telling you this because people think survival is about strength or knowledge. It isn't. It's about what you're willing to abandon to stay alive, and what will haunt you afterward. The woman in white knows that too. By the time people outside the reservation started noticing patterns, it was already too late to call it early. They called it a spike. An anomaly. Seasonal variance. They never call it what it is until the body count forces the language to change. In early 2025, I was contacted by someone from the Montana Department of Justice, unofficially. He didn't leave a name. He asked questions that told me he already knew the answers and hoped I'd contradict them. How many incidents involved white clothing? How many voices used family names? How many survivors reported recognition before approach? I answered carefully. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew how reports work. You don't put things in writing that force action. He sighed at the end of the call and said, "We can't escalate this without proof." I told him, "You already have proof. You just don't have permission." After that call, the pressure changed direction. Instead of ignoring the incidents, administration began compressing response windows. Faster deployments. Shorter decision times. Fewer confirmations before action. On paper, it looked like efficiency. In practice, it forced rule conflicts. If you hesitate too long, someone accuses you of negligence. If you move too fast, she gets you. That's where she thrives. I started hearing about patrols being paired intentionally. Rookies with veterans who had families. Emotional leverage. If the voice uses the right name, the right memory, the right inflection, the veteran hesitates, and the rookie follows. No one admitted this was happening. But patterns don't lie. The elders noticed too. They came to my house one evening after dark, breaking their own customs because urgency outweighed tradition. 3 of them. Faces lined deeper than when I'd last seen them. They told me the stories had changed. Not the old ones, the responses to them. Children were dreaming of a woman standing at the edge of their yards. Dogs refused to go outside at night. Birds abandoned nesting grounds they'd used for decades. The land was reacting. One elder said something that hasn't left me since. She is no longer hunting, he said. She is preparing. I asked what that meant. He said, it means she expects to be seen. The first confirmed multi-incident night happened on April 14, 2025. 6 calls. 4 locations. All between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. A stranded motorist near Bab, a missing hiker near St. Mary Falls, crying child reported behind a school in East Glacier Park Village, a woman waving down traffic on Highway 89, white coat, no shoes. Every call used real names. Every call referenced personal details that weren't public. Resources were stretched thin. Mutual aid failed. Radios overlapped. Instructions contradicted each other. And in the middle of it, one call came directly to me. Unknown number. Montana area code. I didn't answer. The voicemail came anyway. Caleb, it said. You taught them the rules. You know when they break. That wasn't a threat. That was an observation. I listened to scanner traffic all night. 2 responders didn't come back. One was a volunteer EMT named Sarah Klein, mother of a 5-year-old. She broke Rule 8 trying to pull a man out of a ravine. The man thanked her before stepping backward into the dark. The other was a tribal ranger I trained myself. I stopped listening after that. The next escalation was quieter, and worse. She stopped appearing alone. People began reporting pairs. 2 women in white. A woman and a child. Sometimes one visible, one only audible. This broke another assumption, that she was singular. No one knows if she always wasn't, or if she learned how to split attention. Either way, it forced a new rule. Rule 10, if more than one entity presents, disengage immediately. There is no correct response. That rule is an admission of failure. We don't say that part out loud. In May, my son came to visit. Elena thought distance had made me safer. She was wrong, but I didn't correct her. Noah was taller. His voice deeper. Still unmistakably his. We went fishing during the day. Stayed inside at night. I watched him sleep like a sentry. On the 3rd night, he sat up suddenly and asked, "Dad, why was Mom calling me outside earlier?" I felt something in my chest tear. I asked what he meant. "She was standing by the tree line," he said. "She told me you said it was okay." Rule violation almost happened there. The worst kind. The one rooted in hope. I told him he'd dreamed it. I smiled. I lied well. The next morning, there were footprints in the frost outside his window. Barefoot. Adult-sized. That was the moment I accepted the truth I'd been circling for years. She wasn't responding to us anymore. She was expanding. After Noah left, I burned everything white in my house. Sheets. Towels. Old photos with pale backgrounds. It didn't help, but it made me feel less watched. By summer, reports came in from Idaho, Wyoming, even northern Arizona. Different agencies. Same descriptions. Same phrases. No coordination. No centralized acknowledgement. Each place thought it was alone. That's how this spreads. In July 2025, a leaked bodycam video circulated briefly online before being taken down. It showed a park ranger standing at the edge of a tree line, flashlight shaking, whispering, "That's my wife." Off camera, a woman laughed softly. The video ended when he stepped forward. The official explanation cited a stress-induced hallucination. No mention of white clothing. No mention of the laughter. I stopped correcting people after that. Correction implies control. We don't have that. The rules slow her. They reduce casualties. They create survivors like me, people who live long enough to carry the weight forward. But enforcement fatigue is real. You can only walk away from so many voices before something in you erodes. You stop trusting your senses. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop trusting yourself. That's the cost she exacts even when she doesn't take you. I'm more cautious now. Quieter. I avoid reflective surfaces at night. I don't say names in the dark, not even my own. Because names are invitations. And she is very good at accepting them. By the time people started using the word pattern out loud, the patterns had already moved on. Patterns are retrospective. Survival is not in August 2025, I was asked, again unofficially, to sit in on a closed-door briefing in Helena. No badges. No minutes. No recordings. Just a room full of tired people who had all seen something they couldn't unsee and were trying to agree on a version of reality that wouldn't ruin their careers. They didn't call it the woman in white. They called it a cross-jurisdictional behavioral anomaly. They talked about stress contagion, about folklore bleed-through, about confirmation bias amplified by social media. One man used the phrase collective misinterpretation of grief stimuli. I let them talk. Then I asked them how many of their incidents involved responders acting alone after hearing a familiar voice. The room went quiet. I asked how many involved white clothing inappropriate for weather. No one answered. I asked how many victims were found without tracks leading away. Someone stood up and ended the meeting. That's when I understood institutional denial wasn't just incompetence. It was self-defense. Acknowledging her meant acknowledging that the rules we live by, render aid, respond to distress, never leave someone behind, could be turned against us. That our moral identity was a vulnerability. You can't put that in a policy manual. After Helena, the calls changed again. They weren't asking what to do anymore. They were asking how to live with it. A sheriff from Park County told me he hadn't answered his daughter's phone calls after sunset in weeks because once, just once, the ringtone had come from the woods outside his house. A search and rescue coordinator admitted she'd started drinking before night shifts, not to be brave, but to dull the instinct to respond. That's enforcement fatigue. Not burnout. Erosion. People don't collapse. They thin out. Something essential wears away until all that's left is procedure without conviction. She noticed. In September, the woman in white started doing something I hadn't seen before. She began withdrawing intentionally. Responders would hear her, see her, start to follow protocol, hold position, disengage, retreat, and she would comply. She would step back, fade, vanish. No consequences. No disappearance. At first, people thought this meant progress. Adaptation on our side. It wasn't. It was conditioning. The next time, she stayed 1 second longer. Then 2. Then she let them see a face clearly. A loved one. A child. A spouse. She trained patience out of us. The worst incident of the fall involved Deputy Aaron Mills, Gallatin County. 12 years on. No prior violations. Known for discipline. He responded to a welfare check near Highlight Canyon. Woman in white seen standing by a parked car. He maintained distance. Followed procedure. Requested backup. The woman stepped into the headlights. She was his wife. She'd been home when he left. The dash cam shows him freezing. You can see the exact moment when training collides with recognition. His hand hovers over the door handle for 4 seconds. That's all she needed. When backup arrived, the car was empty. Engine cold. No tracks. Aaron survived. Physically. He resigned the next day and checked himself into inpatient psychiatric care. Last I heard, he can't be alone in a room with mirrors. She didn't take him. She took his certainty. By then, people were breaking rules not out of compassion, but out of exhaustion. You can only disengage so many times before the act itself feels like cruelty. You can only walk away from crying voices before something inside you starts screaming louder. That's when Rule 11 emerged, not from elders or veterans, but from a dispatcher who had listened to too many open lines go silent. Rule 11, if you feel relief when a call disconnects, You must remove yourself from duty immediately. That rule saved exactly one person. Most ignored it. In October, the first confirmed incident occurred inside a structure. A rural clinic near Choteau received a late-night walk-in. Woman in a white dress. Barefoot. No injuries. She asked for help finding her son. Staff followed protocol. Locked doors. Maintained distance. Called law enforcement. While they waited, the woman stood perfectly still in the hallway. Security footage shows her turning her head, slowly, toward the camera and smiling. Every monitor in the building went white at once. When power returned, 3 staff members were gone. No forced exits. No alarms triggered. The clinic was closed indefinitely. That changed everything. Up until then, the unspoken agreement had been that indoors was safe. That walls mattered. That thresholds meant something. They don't. The rules were built around wilderness behavior. She had learned enough to move past that limitation. I updated my personal list, something I swore I'd never do. Rule 12. There is no safe structure once recognition occurs. I didn't share that one widely. Some knowledge doesn't protect, it paralyzes. My last direct interaction with her happened 2 weeks later. I was driving home just after dusk. Same road I'd taken for years. Familiar curves. Familiar trees. My phone rang. Caller ID, Noah. I pulled over. Turned off the engine. Sat there breathing until my chest stopped burning. I didn't answer. The voicemail came in immediately. "Dad," Noah said. "You told me to call if I got scared." I screamed. Not out loud, but inside. Every muscle locked. Every rule collided at once. Family. Duty. Recognition. I deleted the voicemail without listening again. Threw the phone into the back seat. Drove home shaking so hard I could barely keep the road. That night, I dreamed of Lena. Of Marianne. Of everyone I'd left behind by obeying rules that felt like betrayal. When I woke up, there was a voicemail on my landline. No caller ID. Just breathing. Slow. Patient. She didn't need to speak anymore. She had learned the sound of waiting. By November, snow closed most high routes. Incidents dropped. People exhaled. They always do when winter comes. They think silence means absence. It doesn't. It means migration. Reports from the south increased. Desert regions. Borderlands. Places where darkness behaves differently but isolation is the same. She doesn't belong to cold. She belongs to distance. I don't know what the final containment failure will look like. Maybe there won't be one dramatic moment. Maybe it will just keep thinning us out. Trust, instinct, compassion, until there's nothing left to exploit. Or maybe someone, somewhere, will finally answer a voice they shouldn't. Not because they're weak, but because they're tired of surviving. Winter didn't stop her. It never does. It just slows the places where people are still willing to look outside. By December, I stopped pretending I was retired. I wasn't on payroll, but I was back in the pattern, monitoring scanner traffic, taking calls at odd hours, translating panic into procedure. I never left my house after dark, but the work still came to me. People don't want reassurance anymore. They want permission. Permission to ignore a call. Permission to walk away. Permission to live with what that costs. No one can give that. You take it. And you carry it. The last escalation didn't come as a wave. It came as normalization. Incidents blended into background noise. A missing hiker here. A responder injured there. A call that never closed properly. People stopped asking why. They started asking how many. That's when containment truly failed. Not because she was everywhere, but because we learned how to live alongside the damage. The Blackfeet elders stopped holding open discussions. They said the stories were no longer safe to tell publicly. Names weren't spoken. Warnings became gestures. A hand on the arm. A head shake at the right moment. That's how it used to be, they said. Before maps. Before radios. Before we believed everything needed to be explained. I think about that a lot now. Because explanation is what she wants. In January, a young dispatcher named Hannah Ortiz broke down during a shift change. She hadn't lost anyone directly. That's what made it worse. She'd listened to too many near misses. Too many moments where someone almost broke and didn't. She told her supervisor, "I can hear them deciding." That sentence should terrify you. Because she was right. There's a pause that comes right before a rule breaks. A silence where the voice on the other end waits to see who you are today. Hannah quit the next morning. Left the state. Changed her number. She did everything right. Still, 3 weeks later, her sister disappeared in New Mexico after responding to a stranded motorist call near a reservation boundary. White coat. No shoes. Different land. Same test. That's when I stopped believing this was localized behavior at all. This isn't a haunting. It's a pressure system. It moves toward vulnerability. Geographic, emotional, institutional. Anywhere compassion is proceduralized. Anywhere response is mandatory. Anywhere someone will say, "I can't just leave them." I've been asked if there's a way to fight her. There isn't. You don't fight gravity. You don't fight the ocean. You don't fight something that understands you better than you understand it. You adapt. You limit exposure. You accept loss early instead of catastrophically. That's the part no one wants to hear. In February, the last ranger I trained, Melissa Crow Shield, the one who survived Lower St. Mary, came to see me. She'd aged 10 years in 5. Her kids wouldn't sleep alone anymore. Neither would she. She asked me if I ever thought about answering. I didn't lie. Every day. The desire doesn't go away. It sharpens. Especially when the voices get quieter. More reasonable. When they stop begging and start assuming. She told me something before she left. She doesn't get angry when we don't come, Melissa said. She gets patient. That's the most important thing I can tell you. She isn't fueled by rage. She's fueled by eventuality. Someone always breaks. Not because they're bad, but because systems wear people down. Because love doesn't disappear just because it's dangerous. Because rules demand a kind of moral amputation that no one can sustain forever. I've seen the future of this, in pieces. More incidents inside structures. More use of recordings. More perfect mimicry. Less urgency to respond, until the response becomes automatic again. The curve doesn't spike. It smooths out. And that's worse. Because once this becomes background risk, the rules will loosen. They always do. Someone will say the restrictions are excessive. Someone will say we can't live in fear. Someone will answer a voice because this time it sounds real enough. And it will be. I don't know if the woman in white is singular anymore. I don't know if she ever was. I don't know if she's learning us, or remembering us. What I know is this. She existed before our jurisdictions. She existed before our languages. And she will exist after our reports stop being filed. I don't expect you to believe me. Belief isn't required. Behavior is. So I'm going to leave you with the rules, condensed, stripped of story, the way they're passed now when there isn't time for context. Remember them. Even if you don't think you need them yet. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge voices you cannot visually confirm. Rule 2. Do not approach white clothing in low-light conditions. Rule 3. Never leave an established route after dusk. Rule 4. If a voice uses family terms, disengage immediately. Rule 5. If crying has no breath between sobs, disengage. Rule 6. Never pursue alone, even if someone insists you leave them. Rule 7. Do not answer calls from known contacts after dark in isolated areas. Rule 8. If she moves closer when you stop, retreat immediately. Rule 9. If she presents as a child, Disengage without speaking. Rule 10. If more than one entity presents, disengage. There is no correct response. Rule 11. If you feel relief when a call disconnects, remove yourself from duty. Rule 12. There is no safe structure once recognition occurs. Those rules won't save everyone. They didn't save my cousin. They didn't save my sister. They didn't save the people who trusted me enough to follow my lead and still didn't make it home. They saved me. And that has been its own kind of punishment. If you work in wilderness enforcement, emergency response, search and rescue, or volunteer aid, understand this. The rules exist because something already learned how to use your duty against you. If you don't work in those fields, this still applies to you. Because you don't have to be a ranger to hear your name spoken in the dark. You just have to care enough to answer. If this reaches you and feels uncomfortably specific, if you recognize a pause, a phrase, a pattern, you're already closer than you think. I'm not asking you to panic. I'm asking you to hesitate. That hesitation is the only margin left. Eventually, someone won't. Eventually, someone never does. And when that happens, she won't need the wilderness anymore. She'll already know how to find you. If you're listening to this and you want to understand more, if you want these warnings to reach the people who need them before they learn the hard way, share this. Talk about it while it's still just a story to you. Leave a comment if you've heard something you couldn't explain, or if you work a job where the rules feel heavier than they should. Because isolation is how this spreads. And attention, careful, deliberate attention, is the only thing that has ever slowed it. My name is Caleb Running Bear. I survived by walking away. I don't know how long that will remain an option, for any of us.